All right, all right. We're just gonna wait just 5 seconds before we get started. Um, to give the notice a chance to start. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Get Global live stream. My name is Link Brown. I help Swiss SMEs drive the growth of their business in the United States, originally from the US, obviously. And thank you for coming to part 4 of our series. Francisca?
Hello, everyone. My name is Francesca. I'm a leadership and team development coach. And today I'm not only at our wonderful live stream, but I'm actually hosting a group of incredibly interested kids for the National Future Day in Switzerland. And I really love doing this also because I feel that's why I want to raise the attention here because I feel it's really important for kids to have the opportunity to see different working environments.
Interesting. So, what is National Future Day?
Yeah, the National Future Day is actually one day in the year. It's always a defined date where kids, more or less between 9 and 13, I think, can go to companies and explore different professions, which are, and in this context, preferably not gender stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to get like more into that. It's
Cool,
great
cool.
fun. I invite
That's cool.
everyone to do that.
It's a cool initiative, and hopefully they don't get on your nerves too much while
I'm
you're
still
there.
here.
All right, all right. So by the way, so we wanted to start. When we think about so today, this is part 4. We've talked about a few things already, and now this week, so we talked about reliability, quality, humility, and this week we're going to talk about being pragmatic. And I find that being pragmatic is a very Swiss cultural value. Now, I have my definition of what pragmatic means, or the way I see it actually playing out. But the definition of pragmatic is about being realistic, right? And and so I wanted to ask, because as an entrepreneur, you almost need to be the opposite of pragmatic. You need to be idealistic in the way that you think in order to create and drive a business. And so one of the questions we wanted to ask from the beginning, and maybe you can just put it in the comments below. It's just, what is that tension that you feel? Because we have a lot of entrepreneurs who tune in. Like, what is that tension that you feel between being an entrepreneur and being pragmatic, whatever you believe that definition is, but being realistic and kind of being idealistic. So it would be really interesting to see, and maybe we'll talk about it at the very end. But yeah, so that's the question we'll start with. But I also wanted to just come back. When we talk about being pragmatic, I always like to start with a story, like, or a way I think about it. So when I think about the word pragmatic, um, I actually think about my personal experience and this might sound interesting, but how we greet people in the U.S. versus how it happens in Switzerland or France is really where I first came. Spent significant time in Europe, and I noticed, that we approach it differently. So, when someone asks me how I'm doing, we Americans, we typically say, "Oh, great, we're doing fantastic, we're doing awesome, everything's excellent." And I find that many times Europeans complain, and they basically think when we do that, it's really fake. And when I think about it, in truth, there's one part that Europeans are really right. I mean, oftentimes an American will say great or awesome or fantastic, whatever, with the hand gestures, by the way, just to keep people at a distance and keep from asking deeper questions. But then I think about it in another sense, and I think where this came from, and I think in reality, sometimes my European friends are actually wrong, and I would say dead wrong in many ways, because part of the reason that Americans, when we say we're doing great or fantastic, is not about how we feel right now, because literally probably think that no one really cares how you feel right now. What we think about is we want to emphasize the way we're going to make the day, the way we're going to pursue the future. We're very forward thinking in the way that we see things, right? And so we know that words um, have an energy really match the direction where you go. And this is why the self-help industry in the US is humongous, right? So a lot of times that's how we see it. We have a very idealistic way of looking at the future, and I'll get into the American perspective of pragmatic in later. But I thought that was like one of the first things that came to my mind. So maybe Francisca, maybe you can just start. Maybe you help us understand, like, what does pragmatism really look like for you in Swiss culture?
Yeah, thank you very much. That is really interesting what you said about the awesome and so on, because I believe sometimes in Swiss people sometimes perceive this slightly superficial. And now you just gave me a really different insights on this.
Mm,
So when I think about pragmatism and in the Swiss culture, I think Switzerland has really a very long tradition of political neutrality. And I think this has been a pragmatic approach to ensure the country's survival and stability in a quite wild European environment in the past. So that could be the reason why pragmatism has become such a cultural value in Switzerland. I think this approach also helped to maintain Switzerland with inflexible relationships with various countries. And also, if you think that some of the big international organizations have settled here because of that, that which has led to numerous business opportunities, of course.
mm,
At the same time, the way we interact in business itself is also quite pragmatic. When I think that pragmatism is probably why we like to compromise, all these compromising ideas we have also very strong in our culture. This as this is always a preferred solution to any kind of discussions between Swiss people. I would say we almost go with the idea to give up something in
mm,
tough discussions, in conflict discussions, and we expect at the same time that the other side also gives up something to get to a common solution. So finding consensus is really, really strong, and I feel that's part of our pragmatism we live every day. Going into the Swiss economy, so we have a strong economy here in this country, luckily. So I feel that we have a very privileged situation. But Swiss people are also very pragmatic in making deals. And I think we have
mm,
talked about this in our previous sessions, not under the word pragmatism, but valuing quality, the punctuality, reliability, um, gives is kind of connected to this pragmatism we live.
mhm,
Um, so so in business for business, this could really mean um, do a lot of compromise. So this word compromise, I think, is really important
mhm,
for pragmatism, as I mentioned before. But also valuing quality and reliability is really, which is really a practical decision-making approach, and therefore seen as, in my perspective, as a pragmatic approach,
mhm,
because it's very practical. It's not so visionary. um, so our expectations are pragmatic, which means based on what we see and what we hear and what we get. So, for example, if we see happy customer, so this is kind of a success. And this is also, we see happy customer success. It's a pragmatic approach. It's less visionary because we talk about what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So in business, it's also important to always show these practical next steps that are logical rather than, as I said, playing with visions. Or, for example, if you go into leading teams, leadership, and these topics, project management, of course, a vision is great. But I think to say this is our goal and that are really, really the next steps, practical steps, is what people count on. And yeah, that I think that's how I see how we live pragmatism and why it is such a cultural value here.
Yeah. So when I hear you, I hear um, practical uh, next steps, like what's right in front of you. And then I never really actually thought about that word compromise. But, it's funny, after we were preparing last week for this, I started to, because I would have not said compromise is pragmatic. I would have, I would have actually said that a lot of Americans, we might see compromises, I'm sorry, as pragmatism as being inflexible in
Mhm.
some way. But I actually just realized, like, oh yeah, I think she's right, and I can see it in Swiss culture as I meet with more and more people. Um, so when I actually think about like U.S. perspective, um, you know, Americans, how should I say? Again, I think we really live in two different worlds. I would say, again, definition of pragmatic is dealing with things sensibly or realistically, right? But I would say that for us, we would say that we work in terms of, like, we take pragmatic actions, but people only move with inspiration, right? So I would say that, an American actually lives in both worlds. We love to dream, we love to inspire, we love to see things as they could be, and because we know that inspiration is what moves people to action. Emotions are what move people to action. So um, it's what makes people buy a product, and what makes people serve another person, and what makes people give. And so it's important for an American, like, to look at things really from both perspectives of what can you do to get somebody to move, but what's that next simple step as well. So I think we really do live in both worlds. And I would say one of the other words that comes up when I think about Americans, I don't think about like I said, sometimes we see being pragmatic as being inflexible, and in actuality, like, because we think about things as needing to be agile, that because agility is very important in the U.S. It's very important that you're okay with trying something, with failing at it, and then with adjusting, right? And I always teach my customers that: try, fail, adjust quickly. Try, fail, adjust quickly. So I think sometimes when we think pragmatic, we think inflexible, but I think that's because we look at agility as well as being extremely important. Um, I don't know. So that's kind of how I think we see the differences. Let me just also ask though, but what would you say, like, how do we actually even move forward? Like, how do we bridge the gap between Americans and how Swiss people see things?
Yeah, I'm happy to say something about that. But just now, something I thought about when you said trying, failing, and adjusting. That's and again, that word
Hmm.
failing is something that I think in Swiss culture is really not so not so well perceived. So Swiss try less. They want to be sure. So where I see really the difference. So particularly in business, but also in the private life, I think people really have this more slow approach because you just said move fast, try again. So we
Hmm.
have rather the slow and secure approach. Um, so and people still feel really not so comfortable about failure, although it's highly discussed on social media, and we see all these very nice keynote speakers that failed and tell that that this is part of the process and it's very important. I still feel that Swiss people and in Switzerland, we are not so open to share failures. Uh, uh, and if we share them, they need to be already quite in the past, and you need to be in the meantime successful. So this is really something which now I see there is a lot of differences. So coming back to your question about how could we bridge the gap. I think as a Swiss person, when I listen to you, because I see this perception is very, very different, I think understand that enthusiasm or the American enthusiasm of the awful, great, let's do it, is part of the rapport and the connection building in the US
Mm,
culture, and it's not mean that that you're arrogant or that you're superficial. It's just part to actually get in contact with you and should be
mm,
perceived as more positive rather than scaring or just taking any other decision on it.
mm,
Then um, as a Swiss, you should not be afraid to tell to an American person, hey, can you repeat? Hey, can you slow down? Um, can you make sure, or can or ask a deeper question on the context, or what is the plan, or give me the next practical step? Because that's really something we need, and if we need that, we should ask it because the other person cannot guess it.
mm,
Um, then don't think that just because Americans are really inspirational, they cannot deliver. Actually, as you said before, this is motivating you to get where you want to go. So it's something positive. It doesn't mean you can't do it and you just tell something. So that is something that I think on this side we should really be aware of. Um, and also, if we have a doubt, look for the evidence and make people give you really the next steps.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's Yeah, no, that's interesting. Because I can tell you as an American, so when I think about how we bridge the gap as American selling in Switzerland, it's what I do. And um, I mean, it's how I get customers, I should say. And I can tell you that that's exactly, literally, this happened to me just a few weeks ago. I'm talking to a guy, and it just kind of snapped in my mind of exactly like how I need to adjust myself. Like, again, um, so as an American, I notice, that we need to bring down this level of like vision and inspiration a lot, like a lot. You know, I was talking to somebody and I was telling them like, oh, we start here, and in 6 months we're going to be there, and in a year we can do this, and they're like, what? Like, no, 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 no. Like, tell me what you're going to do in the next 2 months to get me to the next step of where I need to be. And it clicked in my mind, that's how you need to approach people. Like, it's okay, like you said, it's okay to slow down, to not be so inspirational. You tell people what you can offer, but put 80% of the focus on what are the next steps that you're going to do to move things, to get them in the direction where they want to go. And as you build trust, as you become more reliable, and they realize that you have a quality product, that you're reliable to them, that you're in it with them, it's a win-win, then I think they're much more open to future work together. So it was kind of just a shift for me, for sure, in that. So I think that's one thing that Americans can do: bring down the level of inspiration, and really just talk about the next steps in front of them, and live in that practical world, and be okay with things being a little bit slower. And then to your point of compromise, I think it's also just about, like you said, win-win. Like, how do we create win-wins for everybody? Like, think about that in all of our interactions that we do. So awesome. Yeah, I So really cool conversation. By the way, did you have any? I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add, but I was going to promote what we're going to do for next week, or not next week, in 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks.
Um, okay,
Yeah,
so in 2 weeks. Oh, good. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. That's the right thing to do. Just go ahead
Cool.
with what we're
All
gonna
right.
do in 2 weeks,
All right.
because I hope that we then will have another really great discussion here.
Yeah. So I think about, so we're talking about, today we're talking about being pragmatic, but in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about something I think is extremely related to being pragmatic, and that's about being predictable. Um, I think there's actually a lot of similarities across cultures, but we're going to see.
Mhm.
Now, it's also going to be Thanksgiving in America, so I'm going to find some way, somehow. We're very creative people, Americans, so I'm going to find some way of weaving in Thanksgiving, a Thanksgiving theme, into this whole topic of being predictable. We'll see how it works out. I might totally make it up, but we'll see what we'll see what we can come up with. Um,
Great.
anyway, so yeah, it's been a great talk. Really, just encourage each other to create more cultural understanding. Just because you come from different places doesn't mean you don't have the same similar values, and yeah, it's really awesome. Um, so, Francisca, in
Yeah,
2 weeks.
thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone. And I'm gonna go back to the kids now. And thank you, and see you in 2 weeks.
All right, and Jean Claude says great energy. Yeah, so great. Thanks for the comment.
Thank you, Jean Claude.
All right, guys,
Thank
take
you.
care, guys. Have a great one. Bye
Bye.
bye.